Come on, call you through to police.
Please, we need please, return the door in, please, we can't sleep in the door.
In today's video, we look at a ruthless gang that caused fear in its Liverpool heartland. The gang orchestrated the distribution of Class A product across multiple regions, including Anfield, Lancashire, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, Devon and Cornwall, over a 6-year period. Operation Scarva will be launched by police after complaints from the local community about the county lines that their towns were being flooded by dealers peddling their junk. This is Curios and Spiritual. No deep dives, we're going magnet fishing on this one to see what will pull up from the murky depths. We take a look at the case, the police investigation and the trial. We go to Anfield, Liverpool, home of a Liverpool football club and one of their greatest players ever, Kenny Dalglish. I still remember having several of those Panini stickers from Mexico '86 and a stack of about 20 Lothar Matthäus, who I couldn't get rid of. Kids at school made fun. Kids can be so cruel, but I am over it, sometimes. Anyway, back to the case. In Anfield, Edward Murphy, Jamie Jarvis and Stephen Harrison led a gang not really sophisticated, more blatant and daring, that distributed substantial quantities of Class A product, including other types of Class A, including the old gold and brown. From their base in Liverpool to regions such as Lancashire, Greater Manchester, West Yorkshire, Devon and Cornwall. The product was supplied by Kingpin Francis Fearon, whose connections allowed him to offer Class A2 with a purity as high as 88%. Over 6 years, the gang's activities drew the attention of the police due to the scale of their operations and the violence associated with their trade. The gang started in 2010. There was a gap in the market, and they filled it. The gang was known to employ firearms and intimidation tactics to maintain control over their territory and suppress competition. There was William Summerall, who was trusted with storing the product in Anfield safe houses and managing the dealers. In a bid to expand new markets, low-level members were sent to towns beyond Merseyside, where addicts would be forced to put them up in a criminal tactic known as cuckooing. The gang would then use that home as a base from which they could set up a new dealing supply operation, paying the addict in product to use his or her address and eventually take over the local network. In most cases, the group would use young teenagers, often ruled by fear, to gain footholds in new areas, as their age will make their appearance less suspicious. The gang blew their cash on flash cars, designer clothes and fancy hotels. Key figures of the North Liverpool crime group partied on magnums of champagne before heading back to expensive rented rooms, funded entirely by the profits of their far-reaching network. The gang spent $6,000 a month hiring a brand new Range Rover worth over 100 grand to coast the streets in, the gang's company motor. One of the gang's leading figures, Edward Murphy, was said to have passed his driving test under the guise of detectives before driving around his community in an Audi worth £40,000 the next day. Edward Murphy stockpiled fireworks due to his love of setting them off on city centre rooftops, as well as blowing huge quantities of dealing money in the face of authorities. No forward planning here. As soon as the money came in, they blew it. Money laundering didn't come into it. This was not a low-key or discreet group. The gang also intimidated police officers, filming and abusing them in the street.
I'm shouting and screaming.
You did. Look at you. You've stopped in front of all witnesses.
You little mutt. See you later.
You little fat mutt.
The gang's methods were simple but effective. They bought high-purity Class A that Fearon supplied at 88% and cut it to 15% with everything in the local supermarket to make more product, but it was poor quality for cheap street deals. As well as venturing into neighbouring Walton, they also targeted vulnerable addicts in Lancashire, Cheshire and Devon in their ruthless pursuit of profit. As well as the fancy cars and high-end parties, the gang decked themselves out in legitimate designer gear, nearly all flaunting Rolex watches on their wrists. You know, like we covered in the last video, a crown for every achievement. Achievement? Dealer. Now you know, and I know, if they are like this with the police, imagine what they're like in areas they live, and the people in their neighbourhood. Well, as you can imagine, the gang were about as popular as a fart in a lift, and once the neighbours, the locals, started getting together with schools, also with very concerned interest over the young being used as couriers, and falling into the life, once you start bringing these concerns to local MPs, when there are articles in the news about a series of gang shootings, about areas being overrun with dealers and addicts, that's when the politicians, they then go to the police. Police then get the funding and the hours. They got the green light to start busting the gang. But before all that, police needed to gather intelligence. Not just from their hometown, but the other areas this gang dealt, and the county lines they had created, with the cuckoo addresses, where their dealers were operating out of. The illicit operation was protected by violence and intimidation, not just to the community, but the police officers patrolling the streets. Police body cam footage showed the moment one officer stopped Edward Murphy, John Mangan and William Summerall, who screamed abuse and started filming with their iPhones. The abuse came following a routine stop and search, with the gang claiming they'd been to a funeral. Ringleader Murphy filmed the officer and said, "I advise you, officer, get back in your car." As Mangan added, "You stopped us for nothing." Murphy stormed off with Summerall, refusing a request by police to stand still. He shouted, "Look at you, you little rat, you little fat mutt, you little rat."
Tell me what
You
to do.
come here disturbing people. We've been to a
468.
funeral all day, and you're
Calm yourself down.
Big scene. You're meant to be a
Calm yourself
Why have you
down.
stopped me though? Why have you stopped us?
Calm
We've been
yourself-
at a
I've
funeral all
stopped you.
day. Why have you
How
stopped
do
me?
I know that until I
Well,
speak to you?
Why have you stopped me?
Come here.
What do you want?
Come here.
You got
Clarify that
any
that's you.
suspicions that he's not anyone
Till that
else?
I can clarify
Wait, Dave,
that's
let
you.
me speak, officer.
Listen,
Have
you
you
need
got
to calm
anyone
down.
else? No.
You need to calm down, otherwise you're going to be
Members of
arrested for the public
What
order
for?
offence. You're shouting and screaming.
I'm on
You're
camera.
shouting and
You
screaming.
did. Look at you. You've stopped in front of all witnesses.
You little mutt.
See you later.
You little fat mutt.
You need to calm yourself down, lad.
You little mutt. You little rat. You little
Yeah, can I have a
scumbag
further
mutt.
patrol here, please?
You little rat. You little rat. Look at you, can I have a little
Come here and say it.
The tactic of intimidating officers by filming them is becoming increasingly popular as a tactic used by criminals on the streets. At the time, the aggressive criminals saw the filming as attack is the best form of defence. If anything, you painted a big red arrow over your head, saying you were wrong and I'm up to no good. It didn't take long for the police to gather evidence. After several months, they had the who's who in charge of the smaller dealers, who was supplying the local dealers and the top tiers. The gang really didn't hide anything, and with video taken and surveillance, addresses, stash houses, dealers, recruiters and weapon stashes, police started working from the outer circle and busting the county lines. A good strategy where you're arresting the gang from the outer edges. This doesn't really cause an effect to the central gang. If anything, it causes a bit of a panic. But this gang were unfazed. Operation Scarva was launched, police had made arrests, 6 guns were found during raids. The National Crime Agency had been in touch to assist police after a crack on the encoded device called EncroChat. Criminals used this device, it was deemed unbreakable. EncroChat was one of the largest providers of encrypted communications and offered a secure mobile phone, instant messaging service. But an international law enforcement team cracked the company's encryption. There were 60,000 users worldwide and around 10,000 users in the UK. The sole use was for coordinating and planning distribution of illicit commodities, money laundering and plotting to kill rival criminals. Investigations and arrests started in 2016. Now the gang had been using the device but under code names, but with police intel linking destinations to coded communications, it didn't take long to match pickups and drop-offs. Operation Scarva had just got a dramatic boost, like Popeye with a can of spinach. The investigation till the day of the arrest had taken 16 months. More than 20 detectives worked on the case full time. With the EncroChat breach, it provided critical evidence of the gang's activities, including dealing, transactions, and plans for violent reprisals against rivals. The ferocious ruthlessness of which the gang's leaders sought profit was clear throughout its reign. Yet no one disputed the true extent of the operation had been far more substantial. Francis Fearon was caught distributing Class A product to the Anfield gang. There was not its sole supplier, while a 5 kilogram of Class A package destined for Bradford-based gang was also traced back to Fearon. William Summerall, a trusted member of the group responsible for stashing product in Anfield safe houses and managing dealers, attempted to avoid arrest by climbing onto a roof of the Old Dockers Club on Townsend Lane in February 2016. After the police operations took him down, 4 officers were engulfed in flames when an explosive device was hurled at them from a crowd of onlookers. At least 2 street dealers operated for the gang in Lancashire while under 16, one of whom sought refuge in a hotel in Darwin after a terrifying chase through the town streets, where more prominent members of the gang feared he had grassed.
Hello, call you through to police.
Please, we need please, Townsend and Darwin, please, protection, go.
Right, whereabouts are you?
We're in the red car, and there's an owl chasing us.
You're in a red car, where?
They're gonna stab us.
With police monitoring the group for 16 months throughout 2015 and 2016. In September 2017, 19 men were eventually jailed for a combined total of 135 years for their roles in the Class A racket. When police raided the gang, they found hundreds and hundreds of fireworks, which Murphy stockpiled due to his love of setting them off on city centre rooftops. Over the course of the investigation, which saw a host of raids, even before the major police strike day nailed the gang, detectives recovered £50,000 in cash, but this was just a drop in the ocean, with the true value of their enterprise believed to have been far, far greater. They've got to launder the money because they can't just put it in the bank. This group had no forward planning, they just spent it. The vast majority of that money went out. The case came to court. Prosecutors put together more than 5,000 pages of evidence and exhibits to back up their argument against the gang. The evidence was so overwhelming that every single defendant pleaded guilty. Just over 10 kilograms of Class A was seized, as well as £50,000 in cash, mentioned earlier, and the guns. The gang used a network of at least 100 couriers and dealers, including children, to deal product and use an arsenal of weapons, including machine guns and shotguns, to scare off rivals. A total of 21 of the gang appeared at Liverpool Crown Court for sentencing following a 16-month Merseyside police operation. The following all pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply Class A products. The supplier, Francis Fearon, 30 years old, was jailed for 11 years and 4 months. Key members of the gang, Stephen Harrison, 28 years old, was jailed for 11 years and 4 months. Jamie Jarvis, 29 years old, was jailed for 11 years and 4 months. Edward Murphy, 26 years old, was jailed for 11 years and 4 months. The managerial roles in the gang, Jamie Gray, 28 years old, was jailed for 6 years and 8 months. Mark Forster, 30 years old, was jailed for 6 years and 8 months. Stephen Gandy, 31 years old, was jailed for 6 years. Lewis Aspinwall, 22 years old, was jailed for 6 years. Walter Curran, 24 years old, was jailed for 6 years and 8 months. Liam Dickinson, 34 years old, was jailed for 6 years and 8 months. John Mangan, 31 years old, was jailed for 8 years and 8 months. William Summerall, 26 years old, was jailed for 7 years and 8 months. James Torrell, 25 years old, was jailed for 6 years and 8 months. Francis Usher, 29 years old, was jailed for 6 years. Eddie Hamilton, 36 years old, was jailed for 5 years. Callum Armitage, 19 years old, was jailed for 4 years. Others in the gang, a 16-year-old male was given a 12-month referral order. A 16-year-old male was given a youth rehabilitation order, a 3-month curfew, and a 6-month referral order. Ricky Duran, 30 years old, was jailed for 5 years. Ataf Ali, 26 years old from Bradford, was jailed for 6 years. Abay Jamil, 29 years old from Bradford, was jailed for 4 years and 9 months. Detective Superintendent Lee Turner said this operation put into place after members of the public raised concerns about dealing in their community. Organised crime groups like this, who deal in the wholesale supply and distribution of controlled substance, don't care about the impact that supply has in their neighbourhoods. These individuals expand their criminal enterprise by setting up a Class A supply network, but I'd like to reassure the decent members of our communities that Merseyside Police is committed to tackling the supply and dealers and will continue to proactively tackle criminal gangs who think of nothing of flooding the streets with dealing in order to profit from other people's misery. When we receive information about dealing-related crime and gun crime, we will act. In relation to dealing, we often have to carry out extensive operation, which can take some months to gather evidence, to ensure that when we get those involved to court, the only option available is a prison sentence. This was a very thorough investigation by a committed team of detectives over a considerable period of time. It is a reflection of their hard work and commitment, and the strength of evidence in this case, that the defendants all pleaded guilty at the time and money was not wasted on trial. In the end, Murphy, Jarvis and Harrison weren't criminal masterminds, just men playing kingpins in a crumbling empire built on lies, fear and high purity powder that was cut to nothing. I know I shouldn't, but let me tell you, I bought some trainers off a dealer. I don't know what he laced them with, but I've been tripping all day. And back to the conclusion. Remember in the comments, you keep wanting these in. The gang had taken police's lack of action for invincibility, violence for control, and silence for loyalty. But the walls always close in if you upset enough people. The people, they do have a voice, and when communities and businesses want action, bad press is always enough to move politicians to give police the money and the hours to go after the gangs. Remember the saying I said many times that was drummed into me by my old man? Shame he never lived by the words. In this game, you have to be right every time. The police only need to be right once. Practice what you preach, Dad. But it's totally true. You can't make a mistake. Police can, and they can keep going till you make one. Operation Scarva didn't just pull apart the gang's network, it stripped them of the illusion they were untouchable. Now they serve their sentences, while the streets they once poisoned slowly begin to breathe again. But there'll always be others to replace them because of demand. The gaps left normally get filled within weeks. Their empire's gone. That lasted 6 years. Their names reduced to case files. A final reminder that in the world of crime, the fall is inevitable and rarely as graceful. The nightmare of the community of their reign is over. Oh, and talking of nightmares,